determine whether or not contempt is going to be ushered into the conversation is whether or not there's been substantial compliance, and what it means to actually look like you have substantially complied. It means that you're taking reasonable steps to follow a court order, that you're acting in good faith, and typically that serves as a defense. So if we are still crafting the parameters of said subpoena, for instance, my colleague, Mr. Walkinshaw, just asked whether or not this would be limited to the Epstein subject matter. For me, if they responded at all, then there is some sort of compliance, which they did. They didn't just throw the bird. They didn't just say, forget it. But more importantly, I just want to point out that we are living in an age of hypocrisy, because my other colleague just pointed out that Mr. Perry sits here and somehow sits in judgment of others. Frankly, that is what people are kind of getting annoyed by, is the hypocrisy, because Mr. Perry still has an outstanding subpoena that was never complied with. In addition to that, he talked about we need to care for the victims. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, and I will yield my time. But I don't believe that Mr. Perry ever signed off on the discharge petition in the first place. So I don't know if he is just doing what he believes is politically expedient. But I will tell you this. I refuse to be a puppet, because Democrats tend to be of goodwill. We always want to do the right thing. We are always trying to follow the rules and follow the law. Unfortunately, we are living with an administration that does not care. We just want some type of parity. So, for instance, we all want to hear from President Clinton. If for some reason you said, we will give you, say, Pam Bondi, and then we've got President Clinton with it, or say maybe President Trump and President Clinton, two presidents, because we know that both presidents actually had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. But what looks political and looks like one can get away with everything, especially since that's what the Supreme Court has stated, that's why it looks like it's just gamesmanship. You only care about following the rules so long as you can invoke those rules on what is typically perceived as your political enemies. This is why we are falling apart in this country. We are supposed to be about checks and balances. It should not matter whether or not you're associated with the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, independent, or whomever, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're middle class, whether you're a black immigrant or whatever. But it seems like we only have a political agenda in this committee, and that's why everything goes off the rails. You only love law enforcement when they're going after black, brown, immigrants, that kind of folk, right? But on January 6th, you didn't care about law enforcement because they still don't have their plaques up. We continue to do the right thing and say, yes, apply the rules equally across the board. And then y'all play in our faces and you only apply it to one side. I am asking for one commitment, and then I will yield to the ranking member. Mr. Chair, will you commit to me, as the chair of probably the most important committee in this Congress, especially in this moment where people are concerned about the level of corruption that exists within this committee, will you promise me that you are good for doing whatever is right and following the evidence, no matter who is on the other side of that evidence?
Yes, and that is why I subpoenaed the estate. And we had no idea what was, nobody knew. Nobody knew
I
what was in the estate documents. And I, without hesitation, subpoenaed the estate. We've subpoenaed the Department of Justice.
And that's where we got the birthday letter. We subpoenaed
because
the estate. Hold on, Mr.
Subpoena, right.
Okay, we got the birthday letter, but we can't just get the evidence and then not follow up on the evidence that we actually get. I will relinquish the rest of my time to the chair.
Thank you. I just want to just really clarify one. Thank you very much, Representative Crockett. Just to back to Mr. Walkinshaw's point, I think it's important to clarify that in communication, Mr. Chair, with your team and the back and forth with the emails, the Clinton team made it clear that they wanted to answer questions about Epstein, but that was not something that your team agreed to, only about Epstein. And so that's, I just want to make sure to clarify, and I appreciate you clarifying, Mr. Comer, that you said that you would limit the questions to only Epstein. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think
what the Clinton said that is not true. What their lawyer said is a complete lie.
Well, I'm glad that you clarified for them, because it's been their impression that it's been. I'm just telling you, it's been their impression.
He's paid them too much money then over the last 5 months.
And sir, I'm just reading emails, and I'm just reading the back and forth between them and your team. It's been their impression that those questions were going to be beyond just Epstein, and so I'm glad that's been clarified. So thank you, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Chair recognizes Mr. McGuire from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. 5 months is plenty of time. The Clintons are doing everything they can to avoid questioning. And the American people want to hear from the Clintons. You know, Bill Clinton brought Epstein to the White House 17 times. He had him on, and Bill Clinton was on the Epstein airplane 26 times. So the American people want to hear from them. I don't understand why our friends on the left can't understand that. They support these crazy policies like open borders, 20 million people coming to our country. They've been robbing, raping, and killing the American people. You know, Lake and Rowley would still be alive. And instead of protecting law-abiding citizens, they defend the criminals, and they want to have a defund the police movement. It makes no sense. These criminals they put back on the street, recommit the same crime, and they're like, why did they commit the same crime? All Americans have the same goal, the same American dream. We want to live, work, and raise our family in peace. We just might disagree on how to get there, but the Democrats seem to always be wrong. The American people don't want boys undressing in girls' locker rooms, but for some reason, the Democrats support that. 5 months is plenty of time. The American people want to hear from the Clintons, and they said they had no relationship, but they definitely did. And with that, I yield the remainder of my time back to Ms. Luna.
Thank you. I just kind of wanted to point out, first of all, specifically to the letter, the hand sketch that was allegedly the president's. I believe there's a $10 billion lawsuit that was filed that, according to the president, the organization that published that is actually trying to currently settle. So just to clarify. But aside from that, I wanted to actually ask Mr. Min a question, if he's here still, if he would be willing to vote for a contempt in the Clintons if they refuse to come in and testify on a fine of about $1,000 a day until they comply with the subpoena. But I don't know if he's here. Is he still here? No. Okay. Well, I think that that's just something to consider. You know, we have the ability to do those fines, and I think that that needs to be considered, especially if, you know, optically there is reason for pause for Democrats not wanting to vote for that based on the fact that President Clinton was a former president. I understand the optics of that, and I also understand re-elections. However, nonetheless, the Clintons are defying a subpoena, so sometimes financially people can be motivated, especially if there's a fine, and that's something that we actually all reserve the right to vote on. And I think that that's actually a very good option, especially being that most Americans would go to jail for defying subpoenas. And so I do not think that there needs to be any special accommodations made, especially given the nature of this, but I do think that that can be a tool to motivate. So I'd like to suggest that to you, Chairman Comer, also to you, Ranking Member Garcia, that would be a good method that we specifically reserve if we choose to use alternative means of contempt.
Representative, would you yield to me for a question?
Yes.
So it seems like you're open to changing this, what we're voting on today, so that way we can get to a place where we actually hear from them. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
What I want, yes, I would like to have the Clintons coming into Congress to give a transcribed deposition. Yeah. I think that Chairman Comer has made that clear, but I also think having just Garcia and Comer drive all the way up to New York without that, I think that optically that sends a very bad message as the separation of powers and authorities Congress has. And then I also too think that, you know, it's kind of a slap in the face to people that typically would not have those accommodations made for them.
Yeah, yeah.
With that also, you know, being a part of this, I think that, you know, Bill Clinton specifically said he wants the files to be released. And I think that we also need to consider the fact that there is a judge. I know Mr. Garcia disagrees with me on this, but based on the email that I have seen on Judge Paul Engelmeyer, you know, if you have someone that is ordering the DOJ to do a second scan of the files, if it's politically motivated, that's impeding an investigation. And I'm tired of judges, if they get involved in investigations in Congress, trying to obstruct. And so I just putting this out there, I'm going to be trying to impeach that judge unless he can basically give a waiver, let the DOJ release the files immediately.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just want to say on the general thing, I agree. I mean, I think it would be best if the ranking member and chair can huddle and figure out how we can change it so we can actually hear from them. Because my concern too, and the other thing is, there's no faster way to make sure that we never actually hear from them in person than moving forward a criminal contempt that says put them in jail. I mean, we're just not going to hear from them for our investigation. And so, I mean, I agree, if they can come to something to figure out how can we move forward in a way where we're actually, there's a pathway to hear from them, I'm for that. So
to be clear, I do not agree with what the Clintons are doing. Okay, and I think that they need to come in here to explain. But I do think that when you go after someone's pocketbook, I think that they quickly change their tune, and I think that they might be compelled to come in. I also don't want to set the precedence, though, that just because you're a president means you're outside of this, justice. That's basically what it would be doing. And so, Chairman, I will let you direct the ship on this, but that is my suggestion.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Ms. Ansari.
Thank you. I'm going to start by yielding to the ranking member.
Thank you. And I want to just respond to Ms. Luna and Mr. Maxwell as well. Just to be clear, I think two things can be true. It can be true that we want to hear from the Clintons and that it's important that we hear from them and that we want to enforce our subpoena. I think it can also be true that they have also begun clearly making efforts to answer questions by declaration, to negotiate coming in, to give testimony. They've made offers to obviously be in, their initial offer was to do that testimony outside of Washington, D.C. with the leadership of the committee and staff. They have been open to transcription. And so I just want to re-emphasize that I think there is room here to continue to negotiate and get the testimony that we need. In addition, I am incredibly thankful that we're finally moving forward on ensuring that Ghislaine Maxwell come before this committee, that we're going to get Pam Bondi finally in front of this Congress. We need to release the files, get that testimony, and of course, ask the questions that this committee has of President Clinton. I think that is all fair, and I hope that's the direction that we end up moving in. Thank you. Ms. Ansari.
Thank you. Given much of what we've heard today, and especially in light of some of the hypocrisy that we've heard today, I just want to walk through the timeline of Donald Trump's cover-up of the Epstein files, because I think it's important for folks to remember how we got to this point. This was a series of deliberate decisions made at the highest levels in the White House and the Department of Justice to keep the truth hidden from the American public and the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein and his allies' abuse. Let's start with what the president said during his campaign trail repeatedly. At multiple points in 2024 when running for office, Donald Trump said he would, quote, declassify the Epstein files, use it as a rallying cry to win over voters. In October 2024, J.D. Vance said, quote, seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. But the moment Trump and Vance had power in the White House to act, that commitment disappeared. That's when the cover-up began. On February 27th, 2025, Pam Bondi said that she was releasing the Epstein files with her statement, quote, this Department of Justice is following through on President Trump's commitment to transparency and lifting the veil on the disgusting actions of Jeffrey Epstein and his co-conspirators. Then it became clear, very clear, that Donald Trump did not, in fact, want information about Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes revealed to the public. Starting in July 2025, Donald Trump began to gaslight the public. He said, quote, are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. This is the point when Congress stepped up. On July 23rd, Congresswoman Summer Lee moved in this very committee to subpoena the full and unredacted Epstein files. And just to be clear, because of that subpoena, the Department of Justice and Pam Bondi have been required by law to provide the Epstein files to this committee since the summer of 2025. They have been in gross illegal violation of the subpoena this entire time. To my Republican colleagues on this committee, do you remember that subpoena, the lawful congressional oversight subpoena from July 23rd? Pam Bondi has been in violation of that for 6 months now. At the same time, members on both sides of the aisle filed a discharge petition that would have put a vote on the floor for the Epstein Files Transparency Act. For a moment, the petition was one signature away from forcing a vote in the full House. And what did Mike Johnson do? He shut down Congress. He refused to swear in our colleague, Adelita Grijalva, for a historic 7 weeks in order to keep her name off the list. He forced the American public to endure a government shutdown to protect Donald Trump and to cover up the Epstein files. And when it finally came to the floor and it became clear that the bill would pass overwhelmingly, Only then did he endorse and then sign the bill so that he wouldn't lose. This required the DOJ to release the unredacted Epstein files publicly by December 19th. The DOJ has blown past that deadline, releasing only 1% of the files, which is patently absurd. And the files they did release were heavily redacted, which is completely illegal according to the law. On December 23rd, the DOJ said they miraculously discovered over 1 million files related to Epstein. All of these patterns are an attempt to slow down the release and fail to meet the lawful deadlines are consistent and coordinated. This is all part of an intentional cover-up, which leads to the unavoidable question, who is the president protecting when we know he only cares about one person? I guess I'll end with my question to the chairman. The Attorney General, Pam Bondi, has violated the subpoena issued by this committee. We should be holding her in contempt to remain fair and to remain transparent. And so I ask that you do that if you really, truly want to be fair and care about the justice for the victims here.
May I respond? We have been very clear. We expect those documents. She has complied. She's turned over documents. In the
1%
in the beginning,
not
you all
compliant.
complained and said the first document dump didn't have enough redactions, and the second document dump had too many redactions. So they're trying to get this, and I believe,
Mr. Chairman,
that we will get those documents very soon. I have been assured we're going to get those documents very soon.
I hear you, but with all due respect, given everything that she herself stated in February of last year, her own statements in front of the entirety of the American public saying, we have the documents, they are ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
The subpoena from this committee was issued in July.
And nobody on our side is defending Pam Bondi. I can
then
assure
she
you.
should be held in contempt. If we are
She
going to
is
hold
complying with.
President
They have
Clinton in
turned
contempt, then we have to
documents
hold Bill
over.
Clinton.
They have turned documents over, and every time they do,
1%
you all
of the
complain
documents,
about too many
that's
redactions,
egregious.
not enough redactions. So,
that is unacceptable. It has been 6 months.
all right, your
and
time,
there's
your
been
time's
nothing
expired, and we want the documents. We've made that very clear. Chair recognizes Mr. Crane.
Can I do unanimous consent first?
Okay, before I recognize Mr. Crane, we'll let.
Thank you. I just want to do a unanimous consent request. This is actually an email that has been sent to your team, Mr. Comer, and our team from the Clinton lawyer and the Clintons that basically says, to be clear, we are not objecting to a transcript and never have. Please make that clear during today's testimony that was sent to you, Mr. Comer. So I just want to reemphasize they are not objecting to a transcript. Thank you.
And before I recognize Mr. Crane, let me reply. We just got that email, and we have spent 5 months trying to get acceptable terms that I think everyone within any sense of fairness would agree needs to occur. After we hold this vote, hopefully it'll be a bipartisan vote. They're going to have 2 weeks before this bill is on the floor. They're going to have 2 weeks before the full House votes on it. And make no mistake, to the Clintons and their lawyers, this bill will pass, and I believe it will pass with Democrat votes, even though I've heard Democrat leadership is whipping to try to get you all to vote no on this. They have had 5 months to comply with this, and to defend the indefensible and try to act like Bill Clinton's a victim here, I think is a stretch. We know who the victims are, and I think if you ask the victims, do you want to hear from Bill Clinton? I'm pretty confident I know what the answer will be, because our staff has communicated with their attorneys. Chair recognizes Mr. Crane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, this committee hearing is about whether or not we're going to hold the Clintons in contempt of Congress. I strongly recommend that we do, especially in pertaining to the release of the Epstein files and trying to get to the bottom of what exactly went on there and how Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to continue doing what he was doing and abusing so many people for so long. It's interesting when I look at the history of the Congress and look at the fact that Peter Navarro, former Trump trade advisor, who defied the January 6th committee subpoena, was sent to prison for 4 months. Steve Bannon, also a former Trump advisor, defied the January 6th committee subpoena. He was sent to prison for 4 months, and several others. So it's going to be really telling to see how my Democrat colleagues vote on this one. Mr. Comer, how many times, Mr. Chairman, how many times did Mr. Epstein go to the White House in your recollection, sir?
According to the evidence that we've obtained, it appears he went 17 times during the Clinton presidency.
Is that more times than you've gone to the White House, Chairman?
I've been member of Congress for 9 years, and fairly high up on the pecking order. I've been to the White House, I believe, 9 times in 9 years. So he went to the Clinton White House double the number of times that I've been to the White House in my entire congressional career.
Mr. Chairman, how many times did Mr. Clinton fly on Mr. Epstein's plane?
At least 26 times, according to the flight logs that were subpoenaed from the estate.
Right.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Those were 4 different trips, 4 trips, and every time they regassed the plane, they counted that as another trip. But it was Asia, Africa, and they had to refuel. So every time they stopped to refuel, they counted that as another leg of the trip. There are 4 trips, not 27.
That's almost like I didn't inhale.
Reclaiming my time. That's still enough trips for us to want to be able to ask the Clintons questions about their involvement with Epstein. Is that true, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Right. So, like I said, I hope that my Democrat colleagues who all of a sudden have found religion, this Congress, and now they want the Epstein files, even though over the last 4 years when they had control of Washington, D.C., you didn't hear a peep about Jeffrey Epstein out of any of them. And so I think it's going to be real telling, how my Democrat colleagues who claim to be all about the victims, how they actually vote on these contempt charges for the Clinton family. And I just think it's interesting, too, that, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is you've been working for the last 4 or 5 months to get the Clintons in here. Is that correct?
5 months, yes, sir.
Did they tell you that they would come in over December 24th and 25th, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day?
They have implied that they would come in, yes. Okay,
so that just goes to show that they're trying to dodge suggesting dates that they know none of us are in session. And I think that's pretty despicable. The other thing I believe that they said is that you and the ranking member could fly up to New York, but you couldn't record any of the conversations. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Does that sound like any congressional deposition you've ever heard of, sir?
No, and it would be my word against Mr. Garcia's, and I'm pretty confident I know whose side the New York Times would take, and the Washington Post would take, and MSNBC would take. And look, an investigation, you have to have transcripts, and the media wants transcripts. Well, you have to have transcripts. We don't do the notes. And the Clintons have already accused us of lying, and they accused us of saying this was an unlawful subpoena, which I appreciate Mr. Garcia admitting that it is a lawful subpoena. So I yield back.
I also want to point out one thing that I think has been pretty interesting. When I flew into Washington, D.C. yesterday, my chief of staff told me that he'd been contacted by the Clinton attorneys at least 3 times to try and stop this. So it looks as if they tried to resist you for about 5 months, and once we finally pulled the trigger on it, now they're realizing that this could go very poorly for them. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
That's how it appears, that they could stall, and then when it finally came to this vote, they felt like they could count on the Democrats objecting and a few of the Republicans that the media would go to, and the moderates, and say, oh, is this going to affect your election? Is this going to affect your election? At the end of the day, I think even the media wants to hear from Clinton. We all want to see the documents. So everyone in America that's keeping up with this, which is a majority of Americans, they want answers, and we're trying to get answers here today, and the Clintons have obstructed for 5 months. 5 months.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Tlaib. Oh, wait a minute. Ms. Randall, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to yield 30 seconds to the ranking member.
Thank you. I just want to, again, just clarify that that the Clintons have not objected to a transcript. I just want to clarify that, Mr. Comer, which you just mentioned. And I think that in this moment of negotiation, which you've been in, and you've been in with them this entire time, there's progress being made, and they've not objected to the transcript. Let's talk to President Clinton, and let's get a transcript of it. Let's have the committee there and the staff there and move forward. Thank you.
May I respond? We won't stop the talk. May I respond? They did object to a transcript, Mr. Garcia. They did object to a transcript. They're just now changing because they see that public opinion is not on their side. Chair recognizes Ms. Randall, and we'll give you 5 minutes. We'll give you 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to start by saying I do not feel it is my responsibility to defend the former president of the United States. As a member of Congress in a separate and co-equal branch of government from the executive branch, and as a individual person who is responsible to my constituents, it is not my job to defend the former president of the United States. Just like it is not your responsibility, Chair Comer, to carry out the political retribution of the current president of the United States. It is also not this committee's job to yield to the Judiciary Committee to question the subjects of our subpoenas. It is not our job to defer to anyone else's interest. And in fact, we have the opportunity at any time to amend the rules of our committee should you choose to take action that our rules keep us from taking. Like that is a tool that you as committee chair and we as a committee have. And I also want to say, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a regular person. I'm 1 year into this job, and contrary to attempts by my Republican colleagues to put the burden of decisions made by Congresses of the past on our shoulders, I was sent here by my constituents just a year ago, and it's to them, to my neighbors, who I am accountable. Not to party leadership, not to anybody else, but to my constituents. So I want to talk about what they are seeing and hearing right now. They are seeing, just as Ms. Ansari previously said, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Pam Bondi switch allegiances, decide they no longer want to pursue accountability and full release, unredacted release of the Epstein files. But they're also seeing a system that has failed survivors and regular people over and over. That privileges the powerful and well-connected over regular people. Regular people who don't have the luxury of saying, I'm not going to come to court and I want to be free of any accountability. Regular people who see us acting and carrying out the demands of the president, former presidents, rich people, people who come to lobby us, folks who have access to power in a way that regular people don't. And I think we've all made very clear, all of us on both sides of this dais, that we want to hear from the former president of the United States about any information that he has related to Epstein's ring of trafficking and assault of women and girls. But we also, and Chair Comer, you have said over and over, that it's been 5 months that you've been in negotiations with the Clintons. It has been 6 months since this committee subpoenaed the Department of Justice for full release of the files. And I'm down to hold anybody accountable. I'm down for us to enforce our congressional subpoenas, to uphold our power as a separate and co-equal branch of government. But I want to call the question, will my colleagues on the other side of this dais also hold accountable the Attorney General that has been illegally withholding evidence that has been subpoenaed by this committee and in a bipartisan law passed on the floor of the House. Is it just political theater? Are you just trying to point fingers and say, like, it's you, it's not us, it's them? Or are we here to do the work of holding accountable people who have committed heinous crimes against women and girls and people who might know about them? Are we doing that work, or are we just pointing fingers and trying to consolidate our own political power? That's a question I know that my constituents have, and it is one that I'm asking my colleagues on the other side of the dais. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair, any member seek recognition? Chair recognizes Ms. Tlaib from Michigan.
Mr. Chair, I think many of us were there with the survivors, and I'd like to bring them into the room because I think it's really important. You know, it's not just one president, but now two that have been connected to the Epstein sex trafficking. One of them even testified about walking into the house, the butler opening the door, there's administrative assistant, having no idea she was walking into a horrific scheme that was sending young girls to the powerful, to the rich, the elected officials. And one of the first pictures she said she saw was of Clinton with his arms around Epstein. She saw another one of Trump with Epstein. And I just remember her almost trying to convince us, like, understand that I had no idea, as if somehow she was guilty. Do you all remember that? Yeah. And so I'm here to tell you, I'm ready to vote, but I'm also just taken aback and disgusted because I didn't need a birthday card to say the President of the United States, current President of the United States, had something. I didn't need to see the photos by the chairman today of Clinton. All I needed to do was hear the survivors tell us, please do something. These are people that have impacted their lives forever. What I just don't understand, Mr. Chair, and this is with all due respect, I just don't get why Bondi cannot be held in contempt, why we're not for it. I don't care if she says that she wants to plead the fifth. So what? Do it in front of the American people. Same thing with Maxwell. She's telling the committee she's going to plead the fifth. Fine. Have her come before this committee to do it in front of the American people. The fact of the matter is, are you saying that if anybody wants to plead the fifth, they don't have to be forced to come before this committee? That doesn't make any sense. What excuse is that? That doesn't make any sense. The fact that I continue to tell you all, what is the most consistent thing survivors have asked us to do? Follow the money. How come we haven't forced JP Morgan Chase before this committee? How come we haven't allowed Bank of America to come before this committee? Mr. Chair, it is so disgusting. And this is why everybody's so distracted by this whole thing of like, oh, you know, the Clintons, Trump and everything. But who was funding it? Literally, JP Morgan turned a blind eye to evidence of sex trafficking even after his 2008 conviction. Hear me out. After he was convicted, they still hid suspicious activity reports that should have been reported. You know, you see the fact that continuing them saying, well, in 2028, agreed to pay what? $290 million to settle a lawsuit. I don't care. You come here, and because it's the truth, y'all. You guys got to realize Epstein's not the last person. There's probably another Epstein out there right now doing sex trafficking right now. We should hold everybody in contempt that had anything to do to cover this up, including bank executives that still have their jobs. The fact of the matter is, we know what this is. You want to talk about Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, but talk about everybody involved. Because it does look like you're only doing this to distract everyone when we know not one, but two presidents were involved. And those young ladies shaking when they were testing pregnant because they didn't know if they could trust us. Some of them literally said, we had no idea what we were walking into. But they were connected to the rich. They were connected to the presidents. You heard them say that over and over again. But one of the things they continue to say is follow the money. Because, Mr. Chair, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, J.P. Morgan, all these people, they will not be the last folks that allowed a sex trafficker to harm young women, children. And so we have to set a very good precedent that we will not sit back and say, well, Maxwell's going to plead the fifth, Bondi's going to plead the fifth. I don't care. You're a public servant. Come before this committee. Maxwell, you were directly involved. How many times did the survivors mention her? How many times? Saying that she lured them in. She was primarily involved. And Mr. Chair, you and I had conversations. And you said, give us names. They gave us names. And you know it. So why are y'all focused only on them? And let me tell you, you know where I stand. I will hold anybody in contempt that will not give us information. I don't care how many lawyers they bounce up on us. But I'll tell you, Mr. Chair, shame on us for not forcing Bondi before this committee. Shame on us for not forcing Maxwell before this committee. Shame on us for not forcing J.P. Morgan Chase to answer questions that many of us have of $1.5 billion in suspicious activity. Because somebody had to fund this madness, this horrific actions by these men. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield.
Ms. Tlaib, if I may respond to some of that before I recognize Ms. Bobert's next. Okay. I believe with all my heart you are as sincere as anyone on this committee about wanting to get answers about the truth. And I believe your heart is pure. Maxwell is coming in front of this committee. And
but
we've
when?
tried.
No, let us decide that today. When? Like
well,
when?
It's nailed down. February the the 9th. She's coming,
9th.
and you'll be able to ask her questions. That's one of the things Clinton wanted was only me and Garcia. Maxwell's coming. Anyone who wants to ask her questions on this committee will be able to. So that's.
No, I think the American people want answers from President Clinton.
I'm not trying to argue with you, Mr. Lee. I just want to respond to. Pam Bondi is coming before Congress in 2 weeks. I am confident she is going to be grilled by both parties on the discharge petition. If you didn't want, I don't want to, and Ms. Randall, you mentioned something about the Judiciary Committee. Believe me, I don't want to work with the Judiciary Committee on any investigation, okay? But when we passed that discharge petition, that got them involved.
But we had an outstanding subpoena.
Just let me explain. Pam Bondi's going to be in front of the Judiciary Committee. We'll see how that goes. We'll see if there's been a document dumped.
Mr. Chair, we can't
after that.
forget the banking institutions either.
The last thing, this is the most important thing. Months ago, I approached Ms. Tlaib, Ms. Lee, and Ms. Stansbury, and I said, please, if you all get a chance, and I know you all are all sincere, try to get some names from these women, and we will continue to try to get documents.
Mr. Chair,
if I didn't
Mr.
want
Chair,
to know
let's
that,
follow
if we
the
didn't
money.
want to,
Let's
Ms.
bring these bank
Ms. Tlaib, you're out of
executives.
order. I'm just we want to hold everyone accountable. We don't care. We don't care if they're billionaires. We don't care if they're Republicans. We don't care who they are.
Do you agree to work with me, though? We got to get the bank executives here. Because, Mr. Chair, you and I know that this is still being funded in some other way. Epstein's dead. But we know there's another person out there doing the same thing. We know it because the banks covered up. These suspicious activity forms were literally these reports that had to be filed. They were there for a reason. So we can stop.
And last thing, and then I'm going to open it, I think, to see if there's any other members. But we are going in looking at suspicious activity reports, both Republicans and Democrat staffs going in looking at suspicious activity reports as we speak. I'm all about looking at suspicious activity reports. Now, time's expired. Does any other member seek recognition? Mr. Fallon from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to share a quote with you. I thought it was interesting. No one is above the law, and no one should be escaping accountability. And Hillary Clinton said that. And according to the LA Times, there's another quote. No man in this country is so high that he's above the law. I agree with both of these quotes. Al Gore said that when he was a member of this chamber, Bill Clinton's own vice president. I hope every member of this committee agrees with those quotes. So we have to ask ourselves, are we a rule of law nation or are we not? when a citizen of these United States is subpoenaed by this Congress, they should comply, plain and simple, regardless of who they are. We all get accused of things, and we should do everything we can to, because accusation is nothing but that, to prove it false if it's untrue. Jeffrey Epstein was a rapist, pedophile, sex trafficker. In street parlance, he was a scumbag, lowlife, and slimeball. And some of the things that I've read in these files, he was evil incarnate. He's also dead. I didn't even know who he was until he wasn't. So why are we here talking about a dead guy? Because he was associated with powerful people, some of which are highly likely to have participated with him in some of the worst kind of criminal activity. And if they did, they should pay. They should face justice. Whether they're rich or poor, famous or anonymous, mighty or meek. So is that what we're doing today? Are we pursuing justice and transparency? Because transparency makes an easier and shorter path to the truth. We should be pursuing the truth. But some on this committee and in this Congress are pursuing fame and campaign fortune and exploiting this issue, not in the pursuit of justice, but in the pursuit of raising hundreds of thousands of dollars using a false premise as a battering ram. Jeffrey Epstein, and here's the false premise, that Epstein was a creature of the political right and they're protecting him, and he was pounding around with Donald Trump and those in his orbit. And that's why the Republicans won't release the files. Now that's incendiary, but is it true? Or is it just a cheap, woke fantasy? Well, here's the facts, and the facts matter, so let's look at tail of the tape. How many confirmed visits to the White House? Under Bill Clinton, there were 17. Jeffrey Epstein visited the Clinton White House 17 times. How many times did he visit the Donald Trump White House? 0. How about documented political donations? 21,000 to the Clintons, 0 to Trump. Documented non-Clinton political contributions. 118,000 to the Dems, 18,000 to the GOP, for a total of 89% to the Democrats and the Clintons, 11% to the GOP. Now to the matter at hand. Epstein files released by the oversight Democrats from 2019 to 2023 when they were in charge of this committee, 0. Epstein released files by the oversight Republicans from 2023 to present, 53,000 pages. Epstein files released by the Biden Department of Justice in the 4 years he was in office, again, 0. Epstein files released by the Trump DOJ, 2025 to present, 125,000 pages. And a member of this committee completely jumped the shark again. And right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a left-wing loon, and it was a time where we really need to turn down the temperature and practice some civility, said, and I quote, "Republicans have been so busy protecting pedophiles and rapists that they forgot what this committee is supposed to be about." Well, I tell you what this committee is supposed to be about, Mr. Chairman, about transparency and truth. And on this matter, the Republicans have led, and we produced results, and the Democrats have done squat and bumpkiss. For the record, you know, that kind of incendiary rhetoric, while it may make headlines and make people famous, or perhaps better stated infamous, and raise loads of woke cash, maybe even get you invited to Hollywood parties. But at what cost? Those kind of lies create division and damage, and they're ludicrous, absurd, lazy, and perhaps, worst of all, unoriginal. And I don't think it's going to translate much to Journey to the Upper Chamber. I hope it doesn't translate to that. The Trump administration and Republicans on this committee and on this issue have served Lady Justice by a count of about 178,000 to 0. So the Clintons should come in, honor the subpoena, and testify. And you know why, Mr. Chairman? In the pursuit of truth. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Stansberry from New Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You'll have to forgive me if I do not give a slow clap to our colleague across the aisle for his Academy Award-winning appearance just now in front of the committee. But I want to just address some of the things that I heard here today and to talk about why we're here. What I've heard here this morning in front of this committee is exactly why the American people hate politics. Because the American people don't care if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you're an independent, whether you vote or you don't. They want the Epstein files and they want justice and accountability. And they don't give a damn whether or not it's Democrats or Republicans or who is implicated. They want accountability. And that is what the survivors are asking us for. They are asking us to do our jobs, to make good on the promises that we made them when they came and met with us, and to actually, in good faith, conduct an investigation. Now, I always think it's important to pull back the curtain for the American people about what happens in these committees. And I was not shocked and surprised, but, you know, I think it's important to note that when I stepped out of the committee a few moments ago, the press were huddled on the Republican side of this committee room to take statements from the Republicans. They're not out in the kind of like neutral area. They're standing outside the Republican door so that after this vote is taken, our Republican colleagues can walk out and make a statement to the press. Now, I think that that's important to note for the public here, because this is not about true accountability. Because if this was actually about getting to the bottom of this case and actually holding individuals accountable for the crimes that were committed by Jeffrey Epstein, by Ghislaine Maxwell, by the associates, and the many, many people who are implicated in this case, what would be happening right now in this committee is that Pam Bondi and DOJ officials would be sitting right there on the witness panel answering questions under oath, because they are breaking the law. They are not complying with our subpoena. They are not complying with the Epstein Transparency Act. And on the day, the final deadline, that they were supposed to release their final explanation about why they may have redacted some files, and in fact they have, as has been stated many times, only released less than 1% of the files, Donald Trump used the United States military to invade a foreign country and steal their oil. And while we're sitting here and our colleagues are trying to create a spectacle for the media, every single newspaper in the United States and the world's headline is about how Donald Trump right now is in Europe embarrassing the United States. How he is threatening our NATO allies to invade Greenland. Humiliating the United States. And I have to say, I was home over the weekend for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations to honor the life and legacy of Dr. King. And the question that I got over and over again from my constituents is, what is in those files that is so bad that President Trump is invading Venezuela, threatening our NATO allies, and sending thousands of armed paramilitary troops onto our streets to create violence and chaos in American cities? That is what the American people are actually asking us. And so I will be honest, Mr. Chairman, I am deeply troubled that the individuals who are the subject of today's hearing did not appear on their scheduled date. No one is above the law. But I do know, based on the correspondence, that they have been corresponding with you regularly to try to resolve this issue. But I don't believe that's what this hearing is actually about. Because if it was actually about getting justice and about getting the truth, we would have DOJ here. We would be holding Pam Bondi in contempt, and we would be hearing from the survivors themselves. And so I have to agree with my colleagues that I believe that this is part of an extended smokescreen to try to cover things up. And so I do ask my colleagues across the aisle, if you are earnest about getting to the truth and getting to justice, then bring DOJ in here and hold them accountable, because that is actually what the American people want. I yield back.
And lady yields back. Before I recognize Mr. Biggs, I want to point out again for the umpteenth time, Pam Bondi is coming in front of Congress under oath, and there'll be lots of opportunities to ask her questions about the Epstein files.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
She's violated a subpoena from this committee, and she should be held in contempt for that. That's a fact.
Here's the difference. They have been turning over documents. Now, I've said it 100 times. It's not as quick as we would like, but they're turning over documents. And I've been very clear today and in hundreds of interviews.
You can't be serious
we
that
expect
1% is turning over documents. What's the deadline for them? When do you expect the full document?
In our subpoena, there was no deadline. And then we voted for the discharge petition, and there's a deadline. The discharge petition's in judiciary. She's coming in front of judiciary. Now that is a fact. Don't try to misrepresent. And Bill Clinton's not a victim here, and the media is not going to take Republican side on anything.
So let's just
be right.
I think Pam Bondi.
Chair recognizes Mr. Biggs. It's Mr. Biggs' 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would just point out, the previous speaker was talking about peeling back so the public can see what goes on in a committee. I mean, I just came from another committee where we were talking about massive fraud around the country and in particular in Minnesota. And I'm glad that 2 Democrats could find time out of their busy schedule to even attend that hearing. What a shame. What a shame. When someone says, what is in the files so bad, I'll ask this question. What is in the files that's so bad that the Democrats for 4 years, when they had control of this committee, didn't release a single document, didn't call a single witness, didn't make any motion. In fact, for those 4 years, go back and look. Did they ever say anything about Epstein? No, they didn't. But wanting to make wanting to get it on the press, that's why you're making the issue today. Because let's talk about why we need to talk with, do this contempt, is because former President Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton basically strung us along as we were bending over backwards trying to accommodate their schedule. They didn't show up after we finally had to get a subpoena for them. And I have right here, this is just interesting to me. This is a little note written by Mr. Clinton, former President Clinton, to Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday. Jeffrey, happy 50th. It's reassuring, isn't it, to have lasted as long across all the years of learning and knowing, adventures and no illegible word, and also to have your childlike curiosity, the drive to make a difference, and the solace of friends. He rode on that plane many times. He was apparently close friends with him. Jeffrey Epstein claims that, and I don't know if we should believe anything Epstein says for sure, but I mean, Epstein says that he helped set up and fund the Clinton Foundation, and former President Clinton in his note, I mean, this is what he wants. He doesn't want to come in and testify. He wants to do the same thing that he did in previous times. Just, okay, we're going to send a little note, that ought to do it. He says something to the effect that he spent significant time in the Clinton Foundation after he left the presidency. Well, if Jeffrey Epstein set it up, then there's some reason to ask questions of both he and the former Secretary of State. They were given a subpoena. It was a lawfully issued subpoena by a standing committee. By the way, I happened to be at that subcommittee hearing. I was there when every Democrat voice voted that out. Nobody objected and said they didn't want him to be subpoenaed. But he was subpoenaed, and he didn't show up. So here we are. And with Mr. Chairman, I'll yield time to you if you need it.
I appreciate it. I think that everything that needs to be pointed out, we've pointed out. So I will.
Then I'll yield, sir.
Okay. Chair, any other members seek recognition?
Chairman.
Mr. Mfume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you and the ranking member, and I particularly want to underscore the ranking member's opening statement, and that was that oversight Democrats want the truth about Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and accountability for everyone involved. He said, and I agree, we want transparency, we want the facts, and above all, we want this committee to use its oversight tools in a serious and responsible way. I would be remiss if I did not thank on behalf of all of us the efforts of Representative Rokana of this committee and Representative Massey. Thank God they stood in the way of things and took the heat to get the discharge petition up and voted on. And I want to also point out something that I think is important, and that is consistencies, Mr. Chairman. The action that the majority has been proposing today departs from this committee's established practices, including its long-time standing acceptance of written testimony and the level of accommodation this committee has traditionally required before proceeding to criminal contempt, not civil, criminal contempt. I'm glad, as the ranking member has stated, that the Clintons have agreed to testimony and to a transcript and to meet. I agree also that that meeting should not be taking place in New York. It sends the wrong reason for anybody that gets something from this committee. They should come to the committee. It's just that plain and simple. But it departs in many instances with the way this committee has moved on. And I say that because we never know this time next year who might hold that gavel and who on either side may want to go after the current president, his sons, his wife, his family, and anybody connected to him as a department head. I'm just pointing out the fact that it's a slippery slope. Now, does Bill Clinton have to defend himself? Absolutely, yes. It is a bit curious, however, why we are going after Mrs. Clinton. I've not seen anything, as the gentleman from Massachusetts said earlier, that suggests that she ought to be a part of this in any way or has done something wrong or is complicit in this matter. And I would hope that there's some consideration, Mr. Chairman, to withdrawing at the very least that particular resolution. It just makes me think that this is a fishing expedition and that we want to dust her up a bit if we get her before this committee. Now, a couple of quick things. We're being asked to move forward holding a former president of the United States, again, not in civil contempt, in criminal contempt of Congress. And I'm going to tell you why it's an extraordinary step. Not that it's unprecedented, it's extraordinary, but it is unprecedented in the fact that we did not do that with Richard Nixon. We did not do that with Donald Trump. There was a subpoena, but there was never an attempt to find them in criminal contempt of the Congress or of this committee. It's an extraordinary remedy that's usually reserved for situations where a witness has clearly and willfully defied Congress after extraordinary processes have been exhausted. The majority has not demonstrated that standard so far. I do want to say also that we're in a situation where I don't think that anybody on the Republican or on the Democratic side of this committee is trying to defend former President Clinton. They're trying to find a way to make sure that we're consistent. So the reason we keep hearing the need to have Pam Bondi before this committee is that we're getting ready to bring criminal contempt charges before there's been an investigation. Usually that happens after the investigation. And the notion that somebody is going to come before this committee, Mrs. Maxwell, and take the fifth, I don't care. She's already a convicted criminal. She can't take the fifth. But we can do the actions we ought to be about, and that is to make sure that both of them are before this committee, and then to make sure also, or to suggest, it's up to you and the ranking member, that that meeting takes place and those transcripts are made available, and that Mr. Clinton comes before the committee with counsel so that we then are in a position to move forward. We're taking a big jump here without doing some of the things that we normally do. Now, I'm glad that Ms. Tlaib brought up the matter of victims. She's not here right now, but all of us sat in that room with those victims. It was gut-wrenching, and all of us made a commitment that we would prove that this institution could and would do the right thing. So we're challenged here, Mr. Chairman, and I hope that you and the ranking member can give us a way to proceed here, that both of the concerns on both sides are addressed. But if we just move straight as we're going now without an investigation, it begs the question, what happens when the shoe is on the other foot? I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Simons next. Before I recognize her, I just want to add, with respect to the Hillary Clinton subpoena, you all voted for that. This committee voted for that in a bipartisan manner. Her name was on that list. And with respect to Pam Bondi, again, she's testifying in front of Congress in less than 2 weeks. Chair recognizes Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick comment, and I have a friendly question for my colleague, Ms. Luna. And I'll say a friendly question. I've worked with victims for decades. So few opportunities present themselves for victims to sit face to face with folks who hold power, to beg and plead that everyone who had anything to do with their harm be held to account. So few opportunities. I have been a victim advocate where brilliant young women who have been trafficked across this country have stood in courtrooms and were demanded to testify against their traffickers, and they did with such power and grace in fear that their lives may be taken because of that braveness. And a number of those young women that I witnessed take all that they had to confront their demons, they were murdered because they took a stand. And so when we did stand in front and sit in front of those victims and they gave us their all, I hope that this is not the only opportunity, Mr. Chair, to speak on their behalf. From our president to everyone in those files, forget all the political games. If these women who are connected with the largest sex trafficking ring in modern day American history cannot get justice, what about the girls in every single state? I mean, it is what it is. That being said, Ms. Luna, you talked briefly about a proposal.
She's not in.
She's out.
That's fine.
There was a proposal put on the table